Hello, Super Saver. I hope you're healthy and well. So, the 4-week T-bill hitting nearly 6% in the most recent auction. To buy or not to buy. Plus, a quick update on my T-bill ladders with a potential US default looming. And with everything going on in the world and so much need for actionable insight, an exciting announcement for our community. We just launched our new membership on this channel for our Super Saver Bond fans. Our first video, freshly posted in our members only zone, is a special deep dive into the potential US default and what you can do with your T-bills, CDs, and money market funds right now. But more on this later. And that's what I'll be talking about in today's video. But before I do, as usual, our front of video disclaimer. For a detailed disclaimer, please refer to the end of this video. So, let's dive in, folks. This was the annualized investment rate on the 4-week T-bill at the most recent auction at the time of this taping, an almost whopping 6%, 2 whole percentage points higher than the rate from the previous week's auction, as you can see here. Basically, an earthquake by the standards of US Treasuries. Many of you have reached out about this. What happened, right? As the bond experts on this channel already know, when yields go up, it's because prices have gone down. And generally speaking, prices go down because there's less demand. Or, as Doomsday Danny would say,
if yields go up by 2 percentage points in between Treasury auctions, it really seems that no one wants our 4-week T-bills anymore.
And that really would be quite alarming. So the chart with secondary market prices for US Treasuries for this year so far, which I'll show you very soon, looks very volatile and confusing. Because, well, it really is very volatile and confusing. But it starts making sense if you keep in mind the market phenomenon that we've talked about before in previous debt ceiling videos, known as flight to safety. This happens when markets get choppy and volatile, as they've been for quite some time now. Investors tend to flee into relatively safer bond investments, and especially US Treasuries, rather than riskier investments like stocks, in order to reduce the risk of losses during times of crises. That's what flight to safety refers to. And you can see it from this chart that I promised you earlier on the 4-week T-bill yield in 2023 thus far. Yields were relatively stable at the beginning of 2023. If you take a closer look, though, there are 3 distinct and consecutive waves of flight to safety that, when taken together, explain the market volatility, the choppiness, so to say. Here's the first flight to safety wave, when investors fled into the 4-week T-bill because Silicon Valley Bank and shortly thereafter Signature Bank collapsed, bringing yields down. These investors left again here when it appeared that calm had been restored in the banking sector, bringing yields back up. So nothing to see here really so far, just your classical flight to safety story as expected. Well, here's the second flight to safety wave. I know, right? That was fast. And this time, it wasn't driven by the fear of more bank failures, but by the fear of a possible US default.
But Jen, how can that be?
Investors afraid of a possible US default buying the very bonds of the same US government that might default? Well, here's the link to the entire video on how to invest during a debt ceiling crisis for those of you looking for a detailed explanation. I've linked it in the description below as well. The short answer, though, is that markets overall generally just don't really believe that our government will default. Or so it seems, based on our analysis of previous debt ceiling crises, that the closer we get to a looming debt ceiling deadline and possible US default and or government shutdown, the more likely nervous investors are to flee to the safe haven of US Treasuries, thereby driving up the prices of Treasuries and driving down their yields. As they did here, because these 4-week T-bills here that investors were fleeing into, they were still perceived as safe investments. They all matured before the looming June 1st debt ceiling deadline. Then came the third flight to safety wave here, a curveball to confuse us all, as if life Inflation, job report numbers, and bank collapses weren't confusing enough right now. This one played out a bit differently from the previous two waves, though. Instead of fleeing into the safety of the 4-week T-bill, folks were fleeing out into the safety of other investments. If you look a bit deeper, however, it makes sense really. This blip here where the yields for the 4-week T-bills go up and their prices down correspondingly happened on the day of the first 4-week T-bill auction, with 4-week T-bills that mature beyond the June 1st deadline that Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen had recently announced for a potential U.S. default. So, when those recently auctioned off 4-week T-bills mature, on June 6th to be precise, it'll be shortly after the June 1st debt ceiling deadline and potentially in the middle of a partial government shutdown. And given how volatile markets are right now, who knows what other kind of mayhem? It seems that a significant number of market participants just simply don't want to be exposed to the risk of their 4-week T-bills maturing in the middle of what's potentially the hottest phase of this ongoing debt ceiling crisis. And that's why there's so much less demand for 4-week T-bills at the moment. Investors, in my mind, just don't see these latest 4-week T-bills as a safe haven because of when they'll be maturing.
But Jen, where are these anxious investors who are afraid of the current debt ceiling crisis safely parking their money then, if not in 4-week T-bills?
And my answer? U.S. Treasuries. Just the slightly longer dated ones that mature a fair bit after the June 1st debt ceiling deadline, when markets expect that calm will have been restored, at least to some degree. Because as we can see, the 8-week, 13-week, and 17-week have stayed steady yield-wise in 2023 thus far. In fact, those yields have even gone up a bit, which further validates for us that this flight to safety and this flight away from safety on the 4-week T-bill is really due to the maturity profile of the 4-week T-bills right now. It appears these slightly longer dated U.S. Treasuries are still seen as a safe haven in turbulent times. From everything I can see now, the current dislocation and volatility for 4-week T-bills should prove temporary and should normalize once folks in Washington sort out the current possible U.S. default saga in a more or less orderly way and in a more or less reasonable time frame around the June 1st deadline. If you want to take a bit of a deeper dive into what a possible U.S. default might look like and hear options of what you could potentially do with your U.S. government debt, as well as your CDs and money market funds, this might be the perfect time to join our new membership for Super Saver Bond fans and to watch our first video about exactly this topic. But before we get into more details about our new membership, let's talk quickly about what I'm doing with our T-bill ladders right now. Many of you have asked for an update on our T-bills, as well as an update on this video that we posted in January. What happens if the U.S. defaults on its debt? I've linked it in the description below for those of you who haven't seen it yet. My perspective regarding a possible U.S. default has not changed substantially since I posted that video, at least for the most part. My personal assessment, for a number of different reasons, is that Washington will most likely come to an agreement at the very, very last minute. That the debt ceiling will be raised with specific compromises from both sides and that the U.S. will not default. With this in mind, as my most probable scenario of the 5 that I have in my head, we're still laddering into 13-week T-bills, as you can see from this particular non-retirement account. And similar to the T-bills I've just shown you, we have T-bills maturing this month, in June, July, and August that will be auto-rolled until and unless it looks like they shouldn't be auto-rolled anymore. For example, if other better investment opportunities come up as markets get more jittery about banking and other economic fears. And we are keeping a close eye on the markets to see if this past week's nearly 6% yield for the 4-week Treasury bills we just discussed proves sustainable or whether it's really just a one-off blip. But if yields stay that high before this month's scheduled 4-week T-bill auction dates, we may consider picking up some 4-week T-bills ourselves. Of course, as I always say, everyone's financial journey is different. So what you should do will depend on your personal circumstances and perspective on the looming debt ceiling deadline. Just out of curiosity though, are you thinking about picking up some 4-week T-bills this week? Drop a comment below and let me and the rest of our community know. Now, let's get to the exciting announcement for you super saver bond fans that I talked about at the beginning of this video. Some of you may have noticed, some may not have, but our community has grown to almost 90,000 subscribers at the time of this taping. And with everything going on in the world and so much uncertainty all around us, I've been getting an increasing amount of questions and requests from super savers in our community asking for more actionable insights into specific deep dive topics. We have been listening, and that's why we've launched our new membership on this YouTube channel for our super saver bond fans so that I can create more targeted fixed income videos for those of you who are interested, as well as videos on other topics that may come up from our other members. And as I mentioned earlier, our first super saver bond fan members only video is just out. A timely 40-minute deep dive into the US default and your T-bills, CDs, and money market funds. Here's what I'll be covering in that video. 1. Where the US currently stands on the debt ceiling crisis. 2. The 5 different ways this debt ceiling crisis could end, with my personal probabilities attached. 3. What you should consider doing with your money under each of those 5 default and non-default scenarios, with specific potential actions for those of you who have treasuries maturing in May, June, and possibly July. And 4, what we're doing with our money right now in greater detail. So, our super saver bond fan membership includes 1 bonus members only ad-free video per month, occasional extra bonus videos on current topics and actionable insights, and members only polls and discussion forums. The cost is $9.99 per month. YouTube handles that part. You can join our membership community by simply clicking the join button next to any of our videos if you're watching from a computer, regardless of whether it's a PC or MacBook. If you're watching from an iPhone or iPad, you'll most likely need to use this join membership link, which I've included in the description and or comments below this video. It seems that Google Android and Apple iOS work differently with YouTube memberships. I look forward to welcoming as many of you as possible into this exciting, one-of-a-kind, super saver bond fan community. Alright, super savers, so I hope this video addressed your questions and emails about the recent 4-week T-bill blip and our T-bill ladder. As always, if you enjoyed this video and learned something new, don't forget to share with those you care about, and of course hit that thumbs up, and see you again very soon with another brand new wealth building video.